Well, hello and welcome back to Faith, Philosophy and Life with me, Mr. Shelton. It's great that you're joining me again today. Now, the picture behind me, I wonder if you can see that little dot. That is the Earth, seen from as Voyager 1 was just leaving the solar system. It is a famous picture, and it just shows how small we are, and think about us as individuals living on that pale blue dot, and how small we are in the universe, and actually how great therefore the universe is. And this is only one part of a huge universe. So what we're going to think about today is our roles, rights and responsibilities of living on that pale blue dot. And do we, as individuals, have responsibilities to look after it? And what are those responsibilities? Now, this is going to pick up themes that I know you will have looked at previously in your GCSEs. So there will be some new learning here today, hopefully, but hopefully some of it will just be a refresher for you. So thanks for that. Without any further ado, here is our cheesy intro music. Okay, so our title today is Why May We Have Responsibilities to the Planet? Why may we have responsibilities to the planet? So our learning objective is to understand what Christians mean by dominion and stewardship. It's going to be good if we can describe what dominion and stewardship means. It's going to be great if we can consider why Christians believe that they should have an active role in the planet, and even better if we can evaluate if this is essential to Christian belief or just as an aside as well. So during today's session, we're going to think about if the world, we're going to look at some sources, we're going to look at some mind map research, do a little bit of a grid, and then a conclusion thought as well. Now, those of you that have followed me from the early days may remember what is behind me because it was part of our cosmological argument lesson. And the question is, if the Earth were a few feet in diameter, it's a poem by Joe Miller. What I'd like you to do is, as I read this through with you, I'd like you to grab a pencil and a bit of paper and just doodle some thoughts or doodle some reflections based on what I'm saying. Because I always think this is a very powerful little poem here. So I'm going to read it and just do a little bit of doodling. That's all I'm asking you to do at this point. If the Earth were only a few feet in diameter, floating a few feet above a field somewhere, people would come from everywhere to marvel at it. People would walk around it, marveling at its big pools of water, its little pools, and the water flowing between the pools. People would marvel at the bumps on it and the holes in it, and they would marvel at the very thin layer of gas surrounding it and the water suspended in the gas. People would marvel at all the creatures walking around the surface of the ball, and the creatures in the water and all the creatures in the water. And people would declare it sacred because it was the only one, and they would protect it so it would not be hurt. The ball would be the greatest wonder known, and people would come to pray to it, to be healed, to gain knowledge, to know beauty, and to wonder how it could be. People would love it and defend it with their lives, because they would somehow know that their lives, their own roundness, could be nothing without it, if the Earth were only a few feet in diameter. I just think that is such a powerful poem, because it makes you realise the wonder that we've got, apart from because we're smaller to it. Quite often we might not think that we should be looking after it the way maybe we should. Just as a side note, you might already be aware of that, but Britain has gone its longest ever during lockdown with not using fossil fuels and not using coal. So I think that's a really amazing stat there to give you. And that's the first time since the Industrial Revolution that's actually ever happened. So there we are. So moving on. I'm going to just talk very briefly about some notes that I acquired from meeting Professor David Clough from the University of Chester. Some of you may have heard of him. He did a very good online presentation during lockdown from the University of Chester, which will become available at some point soon, hopefully, about animal ethics and the role that people have. Now, that is his role. He's a professor of theological ethics. I found one of his lectures online. The quality is not necessarily the greatest, but the link is above me there. It's only about 15 minutes long, and I would recommend that you watch it at some point. So make a note of that link in your books. But what I'm going to go through with you now is just some notes that he went through when he was chatting to one of my A-level groups. Okay, so behind me then is a load of Bible references which I'm going to refer to. You don't need to know them all for your exam, but it might be worth you being familiar with a few of them. It says in the book of Genesis in the Bible that animals are good creatures of God, declared good by God in Genesis chapter 1. If you remember, God made animals and he said they were good. And in fact, the whole world was good. And when humans came, the whole world was very good. Humans are given dominion over animals, as you might know in Genesis 1:26, when they're told to rule over the animals, the birds of the sky and the fish of the sea. But some people might interpret that slightly differently. Some might say that it gives the rights to humans to do whatever they want to animals. But others might say, well, it's to do with being gracious to God's kingdom that he has given us to look after. And that's where you start to get stewardship and dominion from. And if you remember, dominion is ruling over the world, stewardship is looking after it. So if you went to a football match and you were there to help people, you would be a steward. If you were, however, the owner of the football team, you would probably have dominion. So the Bible asks us to care for animals, and we get that in Psalm 104, Job 38-41, and Matthew 10:29. So all of those are quotes about the Bible suggesting or commanding people to care for animals. So, you know, Jesus says himself in Matthew 10, "Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground apart from what your Father commands," as in God. The Bible contains many different cares for humans to look after animals as well. So in Exodus 28-11, it's about animals having a rest day like humans have a rest day. In Deuteronomy 25, it talks about the idea that oxen shouldn't be muzzled when treading grain. So oxen should be able to eat the food that they are treading. So you shouldn't starve an animal. And then in Leviticus 22, which is one I don't think I've gotten there, Leviticus 22 verse 28, it says that a cow or a ewe may not be slaughtered on the same day as her calf. Some of you may know that about the milk and meat rule from kosher food laws in Judaism. And then the Bible sort of also says in Isaiah 11 about there being a right relationship between people, between animals. So there's a time when the wolf shall lie with the lamb, that they won't be out to kill each other. There'll be a time when creation itself is free from its own bondage, from its own slavery. I think it's also really important to note that there's been lots of writers within the Christian tradition. So Thomas Aquinas actually did state that animals were not as important as humans. They had no moral basis, was Aquinas' teaching, simply for the fact that they were irrational animals. That's the quote. There's the Dives and the Pauper, which is an early 15th century English commentary on the Ten Commandments, that said that humans should have, I'm quoting, should have compassion on beast and bird and not harm them without cause, and have regard for the fact that they are God's creatures. And then right up to date there, we've got Pope Francis in 2015 in Laudato Si, recognises that every creature is the object of God's tenderness and rejects every tyrannical and irresponsible dominion of human beings over nature. So again, you've got that really big idea that humans shouldn't just lord it over animals, but we are at one with animals as well. one of the things that really struck me when I met Professor Clough was his interpretation of John 3:16, which is just above my head there in that infographic. It says this: "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life." Now, I'm sure you recognise that when it comes to salvation. You'll certainly recognise that in year 13 a lot more as well, with doing the A2 Christianity elements. However, what's really important to note with this, and this is what Professor Clough drew my attention to, is that for God so loved the world. It wasn't just humans, it was the world that he sent Jesus. The Bible talks about the world as being broken and it will be restored in the book of Revelation at the end of time. But it is only when God restores the world that the world is made right again. And the world includes animals, it isn't just people. So I thought that was a very interesting point. So what we've said then today is we said we'd be good if we could describe what dominion and stewardship means. So hopefully now we've got an idea and possibly some of the arguments given about dominion and stewardship. But however, there is a bit more work to go on that. So what I'd like you now to do is to do a little mind map and to do sort of 6 parts coming off it. What else does the Bible say? Or what else does Christians teach might be a better one. So if you're writing that, don't do what's behind me, do what else do Christians teach. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to access the description below, and I'd like you to access the information sheets that are in there. Now the information sheets that are in there do have, it's one document and it has got a load of information in it about what different Christians teach about a dominion and stewardship, and you do need to be familiar with these ones. So make some notes as you go, pause me now, and this should take you about 20 minutes or so. Okay, so far then we've said we'll describe what dominion and stewardship means, and we'll consider why Christians believe they should take an active role on the planet. So that's what we've started to think about. I'd like you as well in the description, there's a couple of things here actually in that link Google Drive as well, which I'd like you now to do. So the first one is a grid that I'd like you to access. This is a colouring in exercise. Okay, and that sounds slightly more exciting than what it actually is, but you might enjoy it anyway because it's something a bit different. You need to look up these Bible references. Now, if you haven't got a Bible in your house, that's absolutely fine. Just go to thebiblegateway.com and you could type in these references and that will give you a reference. At the bottom of that sheet gives you different things like God being a sustainer. And the whole point is what you're going to do is you're going to create a little key, and every time God is a sustainer comes up, you're going to colour that reference in the same colour. So imagine it being something like you might do geography in GCSE where you're colouring a lot. Now, I didn't just say that, sorry for any geographers I offended, but that is one of my running gags. And I do offend a lot of geography departments, so apologies for anyone watching this that does geography. So you're going to choose different colours for each of the topics that's at the bottom of the sheet. You're going to look up each of those references and then you're going to colour match it and see what you come up with at the end of it. So give that a go. This will probably take you another 20 minutes or so. Also, just above my head is another link, which I think you could probably take a note of, maybe have a look at, make some notes from that page. It's a really good explanation, again, about dominion and stewardship and some of the tensions there. So pause me now, do those 2 things, and then come back to me. Okay, so welcome back. So what we've done then really so far is we've definitely done our first 2 learning objectives, and we're now going to just look at our last one, which is even better if we can evaluate if this is central to Christian belief or just as an aside. So it's just like an afterthought sort of thing. Now, next lesson we are going to look at some Christian organisations that support some of these things as well. So we're going to flesh out that a little bit more. But today's exam question, well, it's not really an exam question to be fair, it's a reflection rather than an exam, is how important is managing the planet to Christians, and why do you think this? Okay, so how important is managing the planet to Christians, and why do you think this? So I'm going to leave it there for today. That's your sort of your go-to, your thought for this session. So give that a go, and thanks very much for your time. Take care of yourselves, God bless, and I shall see you in a few days' time with the next one about how Christians look after the planet in a little bit more detail.